All right, bringing us back now to the state capitol. Restaurants are hoping for a lifeline in this year's state budget after thousands were forced to cut back and close during the pandemic. One option on the table is alcohol to go. You'll remember that during the pandemic, restaurants were allowed to sell alcohol with takeout orders for either pickup or delivery, but that ended last June when the state ended a series of emergency pandemic rules. Since then, restaurants have asked for it back, saying it would be a huge relief in a difficult time. And that has the backing of Governor Kathy Hochul as well. But the state legislature has been harder to convince. For more on that, I spoke earlier today with Melissa Fleischut from the New York State Restaurant Association. Melissa, thank you so much for being here.
I'm glad to be here.
So we're talking alcohol to go, which is this issue that you've been advocating for several months now. Since last summer when it expired during the pandemic, restaurants were allowed to send alcohol to go for pickup and delivery. It's something that was not allowed before the pandemic. So there's this push at the state level to get this permanently for restaurants, or in some cases, I think a bill has it for 2 years or 1 year. Your goal, I think, is to have it permanent. So far, the legislature hasn't said that they want to do this. It has the backing of Governor Hochul. Why do you think lawmakers haven't coalesced around this? What do you think the opposition is there?
Well, there did seem to be some, back and forth last year at the end of the legislative session, and we did push for it last year as well and didn't get there. Most of the concerns we heard came from concerns over the liquor store industry and what they were raising as possible concerns that we would have some sort of negative impact on their business. But that really didn't happen during the 15 months that we were allowed to have alcohol to go.
It was the opposite. They made record profits,
That
right?
is correct.
That's what I thought. And it's interesting to me, so I've been thinking about this a lot, and liquor stores essentially have alcohol to go themselves, because now we have apps where you can literally order bottles of liquor from liquor stores and have them delivered to your home. So from the restaurant perspective, can you kind of give some context? How did this benefit restaurants? How big of a help was it during the pandemic?
So during the time that we were allowed to do alcohol to go, we found that those that were able to offer it as part of their takeout and delivery package had about 20 to 40% of their takeout sales that went to alcohol to go, depending on how creative they got and how imaginative they were in their offerings.
That's a lot for just somebody's general sales. If it gets up to 40%, that's quite the revenue boost.
Yeah, we heard that they were, able to pay for additional staff members or pay a utility bill at that time from the income that they got from this program.
That's always good.
Yeah.
So moving forward, if you get this back, let's look at the restaurant industry now. So coming out of the pandemic, fingers crossed, knock on wood, that we're going to come out of the pandemic sometime soon. How are restaurants right now in New York? What does the loss look like from the start of the pandemic to where we are now?
Total loss in sales would be in the billions.
Wow.
We saw from the Restaurant Revitalization Fund that passed at the federal level, they were able to apply for funding for their 2020 losses. And the 2020 losses of the 27,000 applicants that we saw apply had asked for more than $9.6 billion. And they had to subtract out any payroll protection program loans that they got at that time as well. So they're significant just from that year alone, not counting 2021. And then what we saw with this recent Omicron wave hit them hard over the holidays as well. Yeah,
I can imagine. So moving forward, if we were to put alcohol to go back into place, how much would that help restaurants in terms of their recovery? Is this something that would be a lifeline for restaurants moving forward right now, or is this something that would just kind of provide more of a little bump for them? I'm trying to gauge, as we come out of the pandemic and things get back to normal, how big of a part of a business would it be for them?
It definitely depends on the type of restaurant as to how big of the offering is. For some, it would be a lifeline. They would absolutely be able to make additional sales and revenue out of this that could sustain their businesses. For others, it's going to be an extra bump to help them build back. And we're just trying to take all the pieces that really worked during the pandemic, things like outdoor dining and alcohol to go, and put them together and help rebuild the industry, because we really feel it's going to take, I'm hearing, years to bring the industry back.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, 2 years of a pandemic where you're dealing with lower sales, less people coming into restaurants, just a different atmosphere for restaurants around the state. I can imagine it's going to take years to get back to normal. Looking at this, I know one of the concerns about alcohol to go was, and it was addressed in the rules, is if a restaurant is giving somebody alcohol to go, are they going to walk down the street with a margarita and be publicly drinking down the street? So what kind of regulations can the state put in place to address those types of concerns of this public drinking or any other safety concerns related to it?
So the open container rules are still there. They've always been there. I think what we saw a lot during the early months of alcohol to go was that people didn't have a place to go. And there was nothing open, and so they were collecting and gathering on the streets, sometimes months after they'd seen other people. We'd been locked away for quite some time at that point. I don't think we saw it as much in 2021, and I think if you look at alcohol to go as a whole over the time period we were allowed to do it, it really wasn't a problem after we got the initial reopening underway.
So do we know in the legislature, this is the part of this that is kind of like a mystery to me. Do we know who in the legislature is opposed to this? Who's holding this up? It has the support of the governor. As far as I know, there's not any clear opposition from the legislative leaders to it. Do we know anyone specific that is trying to hold this up?
Well, we're really hopeful that it's going to be in the Senate one House and the House one House, the Assembly one House bill. So we really are hopeful that there isn't strong opposition amongst the legislature and that we're going to be able to get it included in those one House bills and then included in the final package with the governor in the negotiations as we move through March.
And I do want to make sure. So I know that there was a bill from Assemblymember Pat Fahey, who I think her bill initially extended it for a year or 2 years. You want this to be made permanent, right? Not just through this kind of recovery period.
Well, right now we're supporting Governor Hochul and her efforts in the executive budget to make it permanent and bring back drinks to go. So we would love to see that, yes.
And with just 30, 45 seconds left, tell me what else the state could do to help restaurants moving forward. Obviously, this would help restaurants a little bit. I don't think that it fills all the gaps. So what could the state do? It
doesn't fill all the gaps. The funding that we would need, again, like I said, in the billions is still needed. So those 17,000 that didn't get funding from the RRF, we're continuing to ask Congress for that. That's a almost $6 billion ask just for those applicants that applied and didn't get funded last year. So we really expect that to have to come from the federal level. But, small things like continuing outdoor dining with the eased restrictions from the SLA has been very helpful to the industry. So we're hoping that they'll continue to do that.
All right, well, we will see where it goes. I mean, restaurants are vital to the state's economy. So I imagine that lawmakers and the governor are going to be looking at ways to boost up that industry as they are with other industries this year, like healthcare. So we'll see where it goes. Melissa Fleischroot from the New York State Restaurant Association, thank you.
Thank you.